Heyo, it's Shanti. Welcome to the Shanti Show. I'm here with
Desirae Simmons.
lovely. Okay, this is a second politician-esque person that we've been interviewing today. I really want to give you an opportunity to let the people know exactly what you do, exactly how you got there, things of that nature.
Yeah, so I am on city council here in the city of Ypsilanti, and I was elected in 2022, 75% of the vote, and I got here really because one, I was asked by people to run, which is great when people are like, we see in you something, we see in you that you're able to provide service, we agree with your vision, we want to help you get there.
I can't imagine being asked to like do something this big, that's like something.
Yeah, it's a lot of expectation.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's also like, it's inspiring and it's motivating to do my best. So
exactly.
And then I would say the other thing that got me here was when looking at issues and feeling like, oh, the person in that space isn't listening and isn't moving forward things that I think actually would help the people and help move forward the vision that we need. And so I thought I could do a better job.
For sure. I love that. I do want to start with just being requested to be in city council to do this job. What do you feel as though are the things that qualified you to be in this position?
Well, I think things that help qualify me, one is just an ability to talk with and work with anybody, and being able to take information that can be really complex and try to simplify it, in a way that anybody can start to understand what's going on. So I think there's that. I had done a lot of community organizing, which allowed me to get to know people, get to know what things are important to people. We were doing these visioning things where people were just bringing their dreams forward. And my brain is like, ooh, that's a great idea. How do we get there?
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's the other thing. It's like, for me, it's more of like, how do we achieve all these goals and bring it together and recognizing the role that government can play and how the government can help. It's about our shared resource.
Yeah.
It is funded by the taxes that we all pay. And so I'm like, what does it look like for that to be put into service to these visions? And so I think those are some things that qualify me. And just a interest in learning and trying new things.
Lovely. When you say like shared interest, first of all, I also this like I'm on the side of like a lot of folks, I don't know, shared interest. Like when we feel like, all right, this is something that it affects the community, we should all be invested in it some way because we have this shared interest. I want to know just the like, what is that shared interest? Why should we be paying attention? Like,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just like our everyday lives. One of the things that I've found, and we can talk about, I like that you introduced me as a politician-esque person. I'm like, that esque is where everything's in. Because one of the things that I realized is really easy to kind of get like, a little like taken down. So much doesn't make sense, especially when you think about at the national level.
Yeah.
But one of the things I learned through these processes is actually like at the local level, where you're just living down the street from the person that's representing you, that you can really change things at that level. And so, I just think that's so important to remember at this stage, which is that things that are actually impacting you, like these different issues like housing, jobs, like mental health, safety, a lot of these issues, there's intersection at the local level, whether it's at the city level or at the county level.
Okay.
And so it's like if you care about changing something that doesn't look right, that's the way to get involved.
Okay.
And yeah, so I think it just has a way to address like material needs, and also a way to think about, there's also the ways of like how we build hope and energy.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's because of being involved in collective activities. And the more we're involved in them, whether it's in like a governmental space, an artistic space, like any of that, that's how we build our own resilience and our ability for connection.
For sure. Okay, so also being local, and like you said, like the person who can change the things that you want to be changed lives like down the street. I want to know the things that you saw in the beginning that you're like, okay, I need to change. Like I gotta step in, you know?
Yeah. So one of the first things that got me involved here is housing. So, and specifically the rental market, and just recognizing, not only how in the current time when rent is going up so much, the living conditions are poor, and people are leaving, right? Like that's an immediate issue. And also longer term, if people are constantly like just in survival mode and not able to feel settled and stable in the place that they live, like that's actually a long-term impact too.
Yeah.
And so so that was definitely one of the things that got me
Can you speak? I
involved.
do apologize. Can you
No.
speak a little bit on that long-term impact? Like, what do you believe that long-term impact is?
Yeah. So one is that, if a person is like constantly putting out so much money for rent, then they're not able to save money for other things, which might actually improve living circumstances in the future. So that's one thing where like people are literally just like putting all of their resources into having a roof over their head.
Yeah.
So that's a long-term impact. And then I think for like a city or a community, then it's like when people have to constantly move, it's hard to then get involved in things like local decision making, right?
Yeah.
Because not only do you not know about it because it's so hard to get information, but also because you just don't have the time and energy and focus for it. And it doesn't address the things that you're dealing with day to day.
Yeah.
So it's like, why put the energy there?
Yeah, I most definitely struggle with that a lot. Just personally, like family wise, like we've moved around a lot. My like mother's side of the family, we were from like Southwest Detroit. I moved out here when I was young. I moved like from Detroit to Ann Arbor at first, and then I moved to Ypsi, and we've been like in 3 places in total in Ypsi from just the last couple of years. So it's most definitely like a lot. And then now it's like a struggle because I have built this community and I am really like intertwined in it, and I look to be more intertwined in the community in the future. But again, like we're just thinking about moving, and it really affects just the ties. You just like your feeling of home. I think we always talked about when we were children, like I just how home is like where your heart is, or like home is where like your loved ones are. And when you kind of build this community around yourself and like just reestablish who your loved ones are, and I don't know, like it's a weird thing to just like kind of up and go, you know?
Yes. It's
But
like remove it from being like a physical place.
Yeah, exactly,
right?
To these people. And that's most definitely a thing. And then it's like, I don't know, it gets it gets some way. But I really want to speak on your not only your involvement, but your just upbringing, your origin of you, your beginnings, as my granny would say. Where are you from? Are you from Ypsi?
I'm not. So I grew up in Chicago and Cleveland, which is the hometowns of my parents, and um, they were divorced when I was a kid, and so I moved between the two. So I claimed both of those. Although Chicago was my first home, and then I went to high school in outside of Boston.
Okay.
And so that becomes part of my origin because I was
So you most definitely understand those people. Yeah, you most definitely understand those people. So you're originally from, I do apologize, want to recap.
No.
You were originally from Chicago. Shout out Chicago. And went to high school in Boston, and there was a third place in the middle. Cleveland, yeah. Lovely. Yeah. Lovely. And you feel as though like you have that community in all those places?
Well, I mean, it's a little difficult. I mean, I have family in Chicago and Cleveland, certainly. So I still have family there. And then, or in like the surrounding areas. And in Boston, it's like I have friend group there, who I miss. I don't get to see them very often. And so, but I still like I know Boston in a different way than I know Chicago. So even though, it's interesting you talk about like the sense of home, right? Like Chicago has always felt like a home, but it's not because I know all the nooks and crannies of it. Yeah. So it's kind of some place that I think I like chose and selected. As a home, and tattooed it to my body as a place to carry with me. Yeah. But I don't necessarily know. So I just have a love for it, all the people, all the places. I love to visit it. And I also love meeting people from Chicago because then they'll say, "Oh, do you know such and such?" I'm like, "No, I don't. But tell me." Tell me about it. Yeah. I want to know. For sure. For sure. And that brings me to the point of just contributing to community. I think something I worry about often is just, okay, who am I putting on for? Like when you get in this like content creator kind of journey and people want to know, where you're from, and that feeling of home, I can't lie, it's Detroit. I can't lie. But I've spent more time out here, and like I enjoy it out here. And even when I go home, it's like they're like, "Oh yeah, you're so suburban." You're like, I'm like, "Oh, I can't do this." So it's like you live in this dichotomy of just representing yourself in all communities that you show up in, right? As to say, I still want to give back to Detroit. I still want to give back to Ann Arbor. I still want to give back to Ypsi. Like predominantly, honestly, I'm living in Ypsi. I operate in Ypsi. Do you have those struggles, those same worries, and how do you cope with those? Or if so, like if you give back to the community, how do you do so? No, that resonates so much for me. So I do feel that, but it's interesting because when I moved to Ypsilanti, I've been here now for 10 years, which is both like a little bit of time and a lot of time. And it's a place that was a chosen spot. So, unlike the other places, true, it was still because I was moved here for a job, but I actually chose this community in a different kind of intentional way than I've chosen other spots. And I also have chosen this community to be the place where I'm growing my family. Yeah. And so I feel a certain rootedness here and a certain sense of, wanting it to be a place that is growing and I'm growing with it. So, which is different from other places, but it is, I have experienced things where people be like, "Oh, are you really from here?" And like, what does that mean in terms of your voice in space? And it kind of throws me off actually, because for all of time, humans move around. Exactly. And wherever I am, I will exert the power and presence that I have been blessed to have
exactly in this
Period,
space,
right?
exactly,
Because this is the place where I can see change, and so that's where I want to make change,
for
right?
sure.
So I think that is definitely that comes into play. But I also, like you, I moved around a lot when I was young, and so it definitely has impacted the ways that.
We're good, unless you're coming in here. Then we'll be good still. But you gotta operate. I got you.
So it's both been like these ways of, so I moved around a lot, and so I had to figure out how to find myself wherever I was. And so sometimes I have this romantic idea of like, oh, people who live in the same place forever, they can count back and they, that's not my reality. And also there's things that I get to bring because of my experience. And so to me, I want to bring that wherever I am to be able to say, I've lived in, let's say 3.5, because even though Illinois, Ohio, and Michigan are all in the Midwest, they're all very different kind of Midwest.
For sure.
And then, Massachusetts being on the East Coast, and I lived in Alabama and down south. And so I've lived in 3 different regions of the country, as well as urban, suburban areas, and sprawl,
Yeah.
So I've lived in all these places, and so that gives me actually a different sense of place and people than others might have. And so I think that matters too. Okay,
I understand that completely. I do also want to speak on the existence of just cultural community and things of that nature. So I think often enough, especially like Black folk, we section ourselves off, and it does, like, even from each other at times. Honestly, even from each other at times. I just want to know, in the thought process of people who think of like, okay, this is for like corporate life, like this is for this is like the preppy folk or the people who are integrating. Like, what do you say to those people who are like, I don't need to be involved, it's because this is just not for like my people, quote unquote.
I feel like there's so many things in that question, because one thing that I really work to do is to reintegrate myself with myself.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of people go around, like, think about like compartmentalize, or, it's like, oh, this is how I am in business. This is how I am in my personal. This is how, and I mean, you just get so fragmented.
Yeah.
And I made a conscious choice to actually push against that. I was like, it's too much for me personally. Like, there's too much going on. I just couldn't hold all those people. And I actually honestly can't hold like all the things I'm not supposed to say in one space and I can say in another space. Like, I just can't keep track of all the rules.
For sure.
And so like which, to my mother's like disdain, she's like, she's like, what if you're gonna have tea with the queen? I'm like, what? I'm not trying. That's not where I'm trying to get to. But also, then she'll get to know who I am. And so I think, I understand. I totally get the different ways too. Like, sometimes it's around like just a certain sense of safety that people have to have different guards up and things. So I don't want to discount and discredit what some people do to survive in these spaces. Because some people, like I've chosen not to be in corporate life, which has impacted my bank account, to be honest. But like, that's okay, because I'm okay with that. Yeah. But so I understand that there's all these things come with trade-offs. But even in being an elected official, I know we're gonna come to this later, but like, I just was going through a recall effort. It was because of the fact that I can't keep my mouth shut, like, on certain issues, and then people got afraid. They're like, "Dang, she might do something." And I said to them, I might. Yeah. Let's lose it to the segue. I just know
And I've been like just being a community member. I've most of been feeling this, just like the discourse around simply your name and how do you cope around it, or like let's start fresh and let's let people know what exactly what's going on, why people are maybe agreeing with you or disagreeing with you in those respects.
So a group of people rose to try to remove me from my seat. And they were pointing to a specific vote I made, which I made in order to try to better protect our city services and our city staff, and to address neglected responsibilities to maintain city spaces, and also to try to minimize the impact on our budget long term. So people didn't agree with that, and so they started this effort. But what we know, and what we found out very clearly through the effort, was that there was the good people that was actually the problem. Like, there was that, which is what they said out loud, but it was all the things that they didn't say out loud to everybody that was the real issue. I mean, this campaign was 90% funded by landlords. Can you tell me a bit about the campaign, please? The recall effort. Okay. And so the people who were trying to remove me from office were 90% funded by landlords. There were the things that they were talking about to people at the doors were about like really large systemic issues that they were trying to whip people into a fear about. So they were telling people things. I mean, like that all the drug use that's happening downtown is my fault. Every business closing, is my fault. That they were trying to paint me as a corrupt politician, even though I'm one of the most transparent ones we definitely have had since I've been paying attention. But they were trying to do all these things, and the good people of Ward 3 saw through it. So that's why I'm still here. But what I know, I always knew I would be targeted, but from the get-go. I had to decide how would I be in adversity to be in this place. Yeah. Because I know that I am not, I'm not a lifelong politician. I don't feel like I have to be a politician to do what I need to do. Yeah. And so that makes it, I'm not controllable. And so I think that that's the issue. And so I always expected that kind of thing. But I thought that they might wait until I did something first. So. Yeah. That's a wild one. Can I were there specific acts that you can speak on? There's specific things, choices that you made that were like, oh, this is like something you think. I feel like people wait for like receipts and like if you wait and look for something, then you find something. Yeah. My father always tells me, look for trouble, you'll find it. Yeah. So like, then people like very creative in their mind. But what are some things that they feel as though like, oh, this is something that happened? Yeah. Well, there were a couple of things that were happening around the time when the recall was first launched. I mean, I think, there were a couple of votes. So like one was I was bringing forward and sponsoring resolutions for a ceasefire. This is back in November of 2024. What is a ceasefire? Yes, yeah. So, when this is what's happening over in Palestine and Gaza, and the war that Israel is waging against the people of Palestine, and so when that was happening, it was actually, I was horrified. And then I had some Ward 3 residents who reached out and said, hey, we want to put forward a ceasefire resolution. Yeah. They were like, this is important to us, and I agreed. And so we worked to put forward something. City Council passed it, but then a lot of people, I'll say some people then were upset about it. Yeah. and then city council unpassed it.
Wow, they passed it.
Yeah, they unpassed it, and so then I worked with people. I worked with especially Palestinian people across the state to craft a second one. So we passed two, and so when people say things, I'm like, we actually passed two different resolutions for ceasefire and an end to military funding. So yeah,
let's go. I'm happy about that for sure. For sure. Shout out, free Palestine. You already know. I just also want to speak on just things you feel as though we can do in this community, in your position or as a community, better.
Oh wow! I feel like literally anything and everything that comes to mind is possible. I think about. I think a lot. Like I get really in these spaces up here too. So I have to kind of go between my loftiness and my groundedness. I'm a Taurus, so I do have that groundedness. I always try to tell people that is what helps me move things. But I also am a dreamer because I know that what's in front of me ain't it. So, so that said, I feel like there's things that we need to do to be better ready for the climate and the realities that we're in now. And so building up our ability to, help more people make the transition and how we need to live, how we get around, transportation. I think these things are huge. Housing, I think, is huge. I think there's a lot of things that we can and need to do to create the kind of housing stock, the kinds of places people live, whether it's apartments, condos, cooperatives, whatever, different size houses, all these different things that we need to be able to do. And I also think that we need to be really thinking about just like how do we interact with one another. Like it's like so basic, but when a community is made up of people who know what's happening with their neighbors, that's a stronger community, right? That's how when something happens, when COVID hit, we really got to see some of the gaps in our social infrastructure. How do people even know who's living down the block and if they need help? And what happens when communications needs to change?
True.
So I think that Natalie Holbrook and the work that she does with the American Friends Service Committee Criminal Justice Project, right across the street from where we are now. They have been doing a lot of focus and work and connecting with the folks there, gathering the stories of the poor conditions. And I'm just going to say this as a caveat, the beautiful community that the women build there. Yeah. And all the skills that they've been practicing that we actually could benefit from if they were back in our communities right now. Truly. And so, we have this whole overall vision of closing down Women's Huron Valley Prison. Okay. What if the state of Michigan actually has 0 prisons for women? Because right now they only got that one. Yeah. And it's in our county. And so, to me, this is an issue for the whole state, but it's an issue for us here. Mm-hmm. We can say we don't want this in our community. Let's shut it down. Yeah. I don't know, because then it's like it's a prison. I don't like if it's having would that negatively affect the community, like not having a women's prison? I mean, I guess it depends on who you talk to. Yeah. I think about, when you look at what are the different crimes that a lot of women are there for, mm-hmm. And then you also think about, people who have been serving these long time sentences. One of the things we need to look at, we look at different information, and then you look at, so when people look at age and what, criminality, this criminality across age. Mm-hmm. And what you see is actually people hit a certain age and it drops drastically. Yeah. People I don't know if it's just because I understand, like this morning I woke up, I was like, man, my hips, woo. I'm middle aged. So I don't know if it's something you hit a thing and then you're like, oh, I'm not going to do any of that stuff anymore. I don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. But all I'm saying is that the research bears out that people actually age out of basically being jailbound. Yeah. We age out of it. And so then when you have people who then have been in prison all these years, they've been in prison years and years, they're in their 50s, 60s, 70s. Mm-hmm. Guess what? They have gotten as rehabilitated as they were going to get up in that space. It would be better for them to be returned to community. I fully believe that community can best take care of one another, and that the ways that we disappear people creates these issues. Now, that's not to say that there hasn't been some harm done. I want to make that clear. This isn't to say that there's some people haven't done things that have harmed other community members. Yeah. And so I think that we need to be imagining and putting into practice the different things that we need to do, mm-hmm. and to actually deal with things earlier on, right? So, prison in general is all about dealing with the issue at the very end. Yeah. Once all the harm has happened, it's like, let's heap more harm into the space. Yeah. And so, to me, I would rather say for folks who've been in those spaces, how do we actually redo it? Like, what does it look like now? What would have helped you and your family? What would you have liked to have seen happen while you've been locked up? Yeah. And let's actually think about the wisdom and put that into practice and say, how do we keep each other safe? Because a lot of folks get into these spaces and they actually find, they're able to feel their sense of, remorse, their sense of all these things that, mm-hmm. And also, think about what does purpose look like now? Yeah. I feel you. For sure. I don't know. I honestly, and this is also what I want to know. My mission in this interview was to have a next step. Mm. Honestly, we are doing our best to spread awareness and what's going on in the community. Mm. But my overall mission when it comes to interviewing people like you who have great effect on the community, mm-hmm. Is to
mobilize the community in itself. So when it comes to even fixing problems in the prisons or even like out and about, what do you feel like could be a plausible, easy first step for people who are getting into it, you know?
Yeah. Ooh, I feel like there's so many things. I mean, one thing, I'll just say this only because right now it's a big focus for me, which is around unarmed response.
Yeah.
I think that we need to focus on building the systems that we want and that will better address the immediate and future that we deserve. And so I think that's one space where I feel like, okay, there's some things to do in this space. It feels tangible. And we'll know if we succeed by do we have it or do we not have it.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a lot of will and resource to get it to happen. But I believe it's important. And I believe it impacts not only...
I do apologize. You were saying you would like to get into, can you just reiterate one more time, please?
In terms of the unarmed response.
Unarmed response.
Unarmed response, and like thinking about non-police response. Thinking about thinking about professionals who are professionals in mental health. And they be the ones that are responding first. Yeah. And thinking about people who are experts in de-escalation, that they are the ones who are responding first. Because a lot of times, like, we actually underestimate conflict, I think, and just how easy a conflict can get out of hand. Yeah. There's so many things where literally it's just because of our poor coping skills that something can set us off. And next thing you know, we over here from 0 to 100. And then we like, what the fuck happened? Yeah, truly. But if there's ways that we can interrupt that, like, what can happen instead? And so I think about that as impacting so many things, but so much of that is also, how do we get closer to prevention? Yeah. So how do we make it so that we can lessen the kind of responsiveness that creates long-term trauma?
Yeah. Just tell me when you're ready. I'll be patient.
Okay, so I just need to restart another one.
Yep. All right. Okay, so we've interviewed Alicia Dyer, and we're planning on interviewing Derek Jackson for sheriff. I just want to know if you have an opinion on like who was gonna, be good for that position.
Oh yeah, well, you just jumped right in. I mean, what I'll say is, so I've endorsed Alicia Dyer, and I am actually co-hosting an event for her next week.
Oh, dope!
I need to do all the things I need to do for that. So,
lovely.
But so obviously, I support Alicia in this role. So I guess that would be my easy answer.
Facts.
Yeah. Derek is also a tourist, so
Yeah. Facts. I get that wholeheartedly. I think like we've spoken to her, and she seems like a great candidate. I do want to give the man a chance and listen to his point of view and things of that nature. But from what I've heard from Alicia Dyer, it's all up and up. Yeah. It's all up and up. Also, a little tidbit, and then we'll wrap up. Truly, I really want to know, just referring to like websites, things that people can tap into. Like, I know there's an election coming up. I really want people to vote and be educated on said vote. How do you feel like people can be educated on their votes?
Ooh, well, there are different places to look for sure, but the best place really is to find a trusted person who knows and just ask them. I think there'll be some stuff coming up. What's Left Ipsy is a community resource paper. I actually think.
What's Left Ipsy?
What's Left Ipsy. So there's a website, Facebook page. I think some of this content can even make it there too.
For sure, I'm most definitely gonna tap in.
Yeah, so I think that's a great source for information and news for folks. And then I know. I'm like, there's also, I'm just like, there's so many things that like, I know there's some like dope people running things. So like,
Yeah.
there's the Voting Corner, it's another website that gives information and is really dialed into like, in particular, like African American experience and like why voting is important for this population. So I think that's great too. And I know, I feel like I should be better prepared for this information for this question.
No, it's all good.
Because there is a lot. We've been doing stuff with ICPJ, the Interfaith Council for Peace and Justice, to try to help support some of that, and help people to know about different groups and information sources. So I'd be remiss to not say that. But I feel like one of the biggest things is like trying to think about like what the ways that people can most what attracts people the most, especially if people aren't used to paying attention to these things. It's kind of hard to say, oh, go to this thing, because otherwise they would be there already. Yeah. So it's like, to me, it's like things like this that's trying to create a new space for folks that they can connect with. That's important. Yeah. And then people then dial in, and then it's through a game of telephone.
I truly appreciate
people call me. They're like, oh, who should I vote for out in this area, because they trust like that knowledge.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Truly. Tap in. I'm literally gonna put the newspaper. You said what's now Ipsy?
What's left?
What's left Ipsy. I'm gonna put that in the description for you guys to go read and follow up. And please stay tuned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's go.